Welcome to L&D Disrupt, the podcast dedicated to helping you overcome workplace challenges and prepare for the future of work today. I'm your host, Nelson Siblingam, and I'll be speaking with the movers, shakers, and path breakers in L&D who are reshaping their organizations right now. Join us each week as we delve into the highs and lows of work in the industry to get to the real nitty-gritty stuff that you actually care about. Alright, so we're shaking things up in this episode as I'm joined by my friend, colleague, HowNow's OG, our head of customer success, Lulu Dermeche. She has tons of experience helping customers implement their learning platform across multinational companies. So in today's episode, we're going to focus on the do's and don'ts of implementing a learning platform. What are the most common pitfalls and how you could tackle those head on. So without further ado, welcome Lulu. Lulu, welcome to the show.
Hey Nelson, how are you doing?
So just so everyone knows, we've just spent the last half an hour figuring out who's going to say what joke and trying to make sure we get this right because neither of us have ever done this before.
That's right.
We've had many conversations and long, deep conversations about many things, but we've not actually been recorded talking about L&D. So this is a first for both of us. Here's hoping it goes well. So Lulu, thanks for taking the time out. And we're obviously today going to speak about what are the most common pitfalls when people are implementing a learning platform within the organization. You've obviously done many of these. And so we just want to tackle what are the pitfalls and how can people overcome those pitfalls, right? That's the plan. That's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's what we agreed on, Nelson. Yeah, that's right.
Let's try to stick with that. So what are the pitfalls, Lily? Tell me.
Yeah, I think we probably want to start with one of the main one, which is not communicating the reason why and the purpose. So we've seen, a lot of companies growing scale-up startups that are just starting at this game of L&D. And one of the main issues that can happen is internal communication, lack of clarity around a project. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about that, but this is definitely from our perspective when implementing L&D. This is one of the main things that we've seen. Do you have some tips perhaps on that?
Well, no, I completely get what you're talking about because people almost expect others should get excited at the fact that we're launching a learning platform. But in reality, no one else cares that you're launching a learning platform. And it's really important, what is it? Simon Sinek's famous YouTube talk now, people they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think often L&D, we spend a lot of time talking about what we do, right? We talk about the fact that all of these courses and training programs and learning platforms, but we don't talk about why we do it. And I completely agree. I think if we spoke about the why, people would be able to connect with it. Like, the why is such a powerful one as well. The idea that we can help you become more successful at what you do every day. That's an idea that every individual within the company can get behind. And almost that's what L&D don't do enough of, right?
Yeah, and so to add as well to what you say, it's not only the why, because sometimes it can be very understood what the why is at the time of buying the platform or implementing a new project, new strategy, but then it's communicating across, because it can sometimes get lost in translation or in implementing something where yes, it was very clear and understood at the very beginning, but then perhaps 2 months down the line at the launch day or 6 months down the line when new starters join the company, they might have lost that message and it's got lost in, the overwhelming amount of information we get every day. So that's super important as well, to keep reiterating this why often enough so that it doesn't get lost ever.
And I guess that leads into another pitfall, right? We were talking about before, which is around marketing, because marketing can really help you communicate that why to different people. And I think sometimes that's overlooked, where you've just bought this platform, but now actually you need to get your customers, your internal customers, excited about this product and why it's going to add value to them. And marketing is the way to do that. And almost thinking like marketeers, like you said, hyping before it gets out there by communicating to buy-in. And it can also be a useful way of getting your stakeholders and the executive team excited about what you're going to do in the company. Have you seen examples of like marketing done really well in customers we work with?
Yeah, we've seen very well and a little bit less well. And I think very much, as you say, it's so important to get the marketing team involved very early on. Sometimes there is no marketing team, and it might just be the L&D and HR team, which is also fine. But it's exactly have this switch on of, okay, how do we want to communicate that? And also, we have seen amazing scaling up companies that have created learning brands from very much scratch, and they were 2-3 people, but they have really done this exercise of thinking, okay, how would our people resonate with the brand we want to create, with the project that we're doing? And of course, it has been a tremendous success because they have put themselves in the shoes of their people, and then they've done this exercise of communicating. And again, going back to the first point, communicating the why, communicating across the business, which takes us to perhaps the third pitfall that we have seen a lot is having, silos and lack of cross-functional collaboration within the organization. So maybe do you have some stuff that you want to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, the cross-functional thing, I mean, it starts even before you start implementing your learning platform, right? I think often, L&D teams often leave it till too late, even in the buying process. Like, I know we both had experiences where IT, for example, don't get involved in the sales process right until they're about to sign, and they're like, oh, maybe we should check this with IT, or maybe the stakeholder should also input on this. And I think it's really important from an L&D perspective to get all of these different stakeholders involved from the get-go, because it also helps you avoid the situation where, we've seen companies where different departments are implementing their own learning platform because they weren't aware of the company-wide decision to get and roll out a learning platform. And, you're going to end up in situations like that when you have silos, because they weren't consulted on what their requirements and needs were. And so the department leads probably don't know whether you're buying something that's actually going to help them solve their problem. And on the other hand, maybe they weren't even aware. And that's the worst kind. And going back to marketing again, when you don't do a good job of marketing what's on offer, the worst case scenario is people don't even know what's on offer. And so you're putting all this time and effort in creating great learning resources, building this brand to put out the learning platform, but you're not doing a good job of getting it out to them. And therefore it ends up being a waste, right? Because the bottom line is any learning that doesn't add value to your internal customers is a waste. And it doesn't matter how beautiful it looks, how great it looks, and how clever it sounds. If it didn't connect with your internal customer and they weren't able to apply it and improve, it's a waste. And that's really where all of these things come in, bringing your different departments together. And with marketing, I remember, I don't know if you remember, one of our earliest customers we worked with was a fast growing tech company. And they did this really cool thing where they changed everyone's, it's this screensaver, right? They changed.
Yeah. So it was a screensaver on everybody's laptop, business laptops,
Yeah, it was super cool. Like no one knew what was coming, but they knew to anticipate something, which created a good kind of conversation and excitement around the fact that this learning brand was being launched. I know other organizations we've worked with have created like teaser videos featuring some of their own people, which makes it a lot more relatable, which I thought is great. Some of the things that we've seen happen using social channels. I think sometimes internal teams overlook using company social channels because they think surely that's just for the external facing audience. But actually, no, people who work in the company are also following you on these social channels. Anything else that you've seen people do really well?
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, we've seen so many great initiatives. We've had people sending swag packs on launching day so that, you know, they had chocolates and mugs and things like with the new learning brand that they had created to create a bit of excitement.
Very cool.
And it was a big event. So we've seen that. Some other companies did a face-to-face kind of launch event where everybody was in the office, and well, that was before, back in the days, but some companies did that. There was some town halls to announce it to the entire business to create a bit of a hype before, and then, you know, a series of webinars. So customer keeps surprising us on a daily basis. They always come up with new ways of announcing it. Some did like bingo games and things like that, just to create a bit of excitement about whatever project they've run.
Another good one, actually, I guess it's the idea of kind of influencer programs. Why don't you talk about the champions? I know we've done that a few times in organizations where you build a community of champions. How does that work?
Yeah, so usually the champions are kind of selected during the implementation phase. And they usually are people that are helping during the pilot phase to test the product, to test the initiatives, the learning initiatives that have been created. But they're also, learning influencer in terms of they can be from anywhere in the business, whether it's geographical region, also different job titles, job roles, teams, etc. But there are people that, either they learn on a daily basis and they're known for that, or they are influencing other people to learn. And this is really important because they are going to be the very first people who have a say in what is needed, what is required, what people are asking. They're a little bit the spies within the business for the L&D and HR team, because they know they have a say for other people, and they're going to start building this knowledge kind of sharing culture within the business. And obviously, you can implement the greatest platform. If you don't have any leaders at the top of it, things might slow down slightly. So the champions are usually people that are on top of the HR and L&D team that are implementing the platform. There are people that are also going to push. They're going to push. They're also going to push and influence other people to know what is okay to share, and perhaps give a bit of an example so that they're the first one jumping in the pool of knowledge, and then people will usually follow by example. So yeah, we've seen quite a lot of really successful champion programs happening. And it's important as well for not only for the business, but for us to understand what works, what doesn't work, so that they have feedback. Well, they give it to us, and it doesn't always come from, an administrative kind of perspective or a management perspective. It also comes from the end users. And that's important to have this kind of 360 round approach so that we understand really what everyone involved in the platform wants and needs and requires, so that then we can give best suggestions to the L&D teams.
Lulu, there's so much good stuff in that. I want to break up some of the things, because
I
love the point around, and I think it's a really important point, that the champions that you choose, they don't have to be people in leadership roles. And I think often this is one of the mistakes people make, is they think to have influence, you need to be in a quote unquote senior role or leadership role. Actually, in reality, yeah, there's somewhat of an influence, and hence the reason why someone's in a leadership role. But there are many, many influencers in the business who might not have a leadership role, but almost sometimes have as much influence that they've earned. It's the social capital of, that person who's like Lulu is an influencer at HowNow. It's that person who, is out at the socials, has a great relationship with everyone, a personable relationship, and regardless of whether they're in their own team or not. And I think it's finding people like that who have that social capital and influence, and leveraging that to get the kind of message out there, I thought is a really, really good point, because especially success stories. I think if you've got, I know we had one organization we work with where they had one particular team who had adopted the HowNow much faster than the other teams. And I know they started using that particular team as a success story to kind of market it to the rest of the team, going, look, this is what value you can get when you adopt and use this properly. And that kind of leads me into something I wanted to ask you about, Lulu, around implementing based on, we talk about use cases, right? Is rather than just launching a platform and going, here you go, use it for learning, actually structuring the implementation around solving problems so you're able to drive adoption from day one. So how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's important. We realized that, yes, it might have been at first people want to do everything at once, but we know the brain works one thing at a time. So we had to kind of structure that a little bit when implementing HowNow, just because you can always build on top of things, but we need to focus on a few things at the time so that, you know, you can, it's almost the gift that keeps on giving, right? So if you start with, let's say, two main use cases that you know your people require and need, then you can really make it not perfect, because things are going to be reiterated, but you can make it great, and then on top of that keep building. So yeah, we found that it's a much preferable approach, one especially with smaller SMBs and mid-market companies, just because they don't necessarily have all of the resources to have everybody involved at once, but it's also to kind of have the time to stabilize a little bit what they are implementing. So we know, for example, onboarding is really required for businesses, because people are spending so much time and effort to try and give a consistent experience. But we know, even if I try my best at giving twice the same experience, I'm going to be in a different mood. I'm going to forget to send one slide. You're going to forget to do a session with them. So we really need to make sure that the approach is consistent. So let's say we would decide, okay, onboarding is one of the first one based on the customer requirements, and then we'll keep building on top of that to then progressively involve these champions that are for example, in the implementation, involve IT for a specific use case that they're required, involve, etc. So we can always build on top of that. And that's been much easier from, I think, a customer success approach, but also we know it's been much smoother for the customers, because at least it takes a little bit away oh my gosh, we have to do everything, and where do we start? It's so overwhelming. So at least we can focus effort and help them that way.
And it kind of takes you away from this kind of big bang launch, right? I think often what happens is, people wait for months and months to get it perfect. And what they kind of overlook is the risk that you could spend 6 months trying to get it right, and it could still be wrong on the day you launch. So you're better off kind of starting to test it in small ways and be more agile in your approach, right? So picking a handful of use cases, then prioritizing one use case, planning your launch around really nailing and solving that problem for that target audience. Learn from it. People might say you could have improved your messaging. You could have improved the way you were sending out the comms or the content that you had on it. Take that feedback, then go to your second audience, apply that feedback, and you will be better. And so that way you're gradually getting better by the time you roll it out to the entire company, rather than risking getting it wrong for everyone on day one. And sometimes there's too much pressure as well. It's more important you solve the problem than you have a company-wide big launch. Another one I was going to ask you.
Just on top of that, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's what it's about. Yeah.
But yeah, on top of that is, I think we have learned a lot, and of course, HowNow, we make mistakes, but we learn from it really quickly, and we had to tell that to the customers as well, because as you say, they were trained to do everything at once. And it was a lot of pressure. But actually, when they realized they didn't have to, I think it made things so much smoother on an implementation level. And as I said, it's always great to keep on giving new use cases, new content, new ways of using the platform. So I think it's becoming fun for the L&D teams to actually implement the system, because they keep thinking of, oh my gosh, we have new things we want to add on top, on top, on top. So that means that, they can foresee in 6 months' time, they know that they want to do project 1 and 2 and 3, but they don't have to deliver everything at once. So it's a little bit more exciting, I guess, for them and for the users too.
Yeah, and getting on content, right? Content's a big part of when we're working on implementation. We're often discussing doing like a content audit or migrating content from elsewhere. But I guess one of the most important things during that is how relevant is that content when someone comes into that learning platform for the first time? So when someone comes into your instance of HowNow, what do they see? Do they see things that connect and are relevant to them? And a really great way of doing that is getting people from within the company to create and share content, because straight away it is relevant, because these are people I know who are finding and sharing things that are going to be relevant to the space that our company are in. It's going to be relevant to our company. And also, I'm interested in knowing, what are other people in the company learning, right? Whether we work in the same team or not, I'm curious, so-and-so has just shared this thing saying it's useful. I don't know, something about leadership or working productively in a remote world. And that layer of social learning and knowledge sharing straight away gives you an air of relevance that you wouldn't get by dumping a million courses on someone and saying, here you go, here's some useful content. So I think a great way of being relevant from day one, even if it's not a case of getting everyone to share knowledge, I think create content that features people from within your company. Like something as simple as create a podcast series with the managers within your company, right? I will come to the learning platform because that's the only place where I can hear this podcast that features people I know from the company. Or if you're going to create compliance training or any other type of video content, audio content, feature people from within the organization. It straight away personalizes it, makes it relevant. And I think that's a great way of capturing your culture in those early days of when you implement your learning platform. I think we've spoken about some of the major ones. Anything else, Lulu, we've missed?
No, but I think from what you were saying regarding the knowledge and who creates the knowledge, there is a change of how we learn. There is a change of who can share knowledge nowadays. And I think it's very important to reiterate that it shouldn't be top down anymore, because people, no matter where they are in the business, it could be a new joiner that has spent 10 years in a different sector. We all have a word to say, that's so philosophical, but we all have something to share. And it's so important to enable that within a business, because too often it has to come from a manager one that says, you have to learn this, or it could be perhaps the G Suite that it is implementing. So I think it's really important to kind of relax that in company and enabling people to share that and making sure that they understand and they know that it's okay for them to share, because they are knowledgeable, everybody at whatever level they are. So I think, that would also help, as you said, for the social learning element of things as well.
And it tackles the whole thing around, I'm sure you've heard this as well, but some people, when it comes to knowledge sharing, and especially when it's new to their company, they're like, but is there a way of approving or moderating what people are posting, right? It's not scalable. If a handful of L&D people had to approve or disapprove of every bit of knowledge that's being shared in a company, you're never going to be able to build a social learning knowledge sharing culture. You're better off approaching it where you let people share, and then you have the tools for moderation. Like within HowNow, for example, you can flag something if it's inappropriate. You can verify things to make sure it's accurate and up to date. So there are different tools to use. So the community are empowered to moderate the content rather than a handful of people, because people will never feel empowered to share if they always feel like the gatekeepers who are constantly gonna, who are the ones who are gonna check and allow and disallow things to go through. So I think it's important. It's a mindset shift, right? And often, I guess we've not really touched on this, but during implementation, one of the biggest things, people often think it's the technical implementation, but actually in this day and age, SaaS tools they work out of the box. It's very quick and easy to set up and running. The bigger challenge is actually the mindset shift, right? What are your kind of experiences there, Lulu, with people who are kind of moving from one type of learning culture and they're trying to shift it, and that's the reason why they got HowNow? What are some of the challenges you see there?
What I'm going to say, I'm French, is free the knowledge. I think it's so important to exactly that, make sure that there is no breaks in every step of the way to share anything. And of course, you can have principles and make sure that people are aware of the main values and how to share the content and what not to share. But at some point as well, we need to accept that certain teams are going to share certain information, and it's going to be they shared it because at some point they thought it was relevant. So why not leaving this happen in the remit of their team? And also, I think it's good to have these verifiers, etc., because you can make sure that the knowledge that you share is always relevant and is always up to date. I think that's one thing that is also important to keep in mind is, of course, people are usually saying, but what if it becomes just a knowledge dump and you can have everything and anything? Well, that's again, you empower people to make sure that they keep that knowledge up to date and have a feeling of ownership around something, so that it becomes, again, it builds on top of what you've created as a learning culture.
And it's a type of curation, right? Like it's not different to if you're using LinkedIn or any other social network. You're curating the content you see by the people you follow, right? The people you follow and the things that you like. And it's the same within the organization, is essentially by getting people to share knowledge, they're pre-filtering the world of content that's out there. They're picking something out by saying, actually, here's a book I find useful. Here's a blog I find useful. Here's a podcast I find useful. And I think for companies to be able to learn at the speed that they need to learn today, you need to, like you said before, shift from a top-down to a bottom-up approach where people own their own development and their learning. And a part of that learning is sharing what they know. Right? It's not just consuming stuff from others, it's also contributing and sharing. Well, Lulu, I think we've covered a fair few pitfalls. Any final words?
Yes, that knowledge is very vast and it needs to be defined as well in terms of what is shared within the business, but it has to happen. Knowledge and sharing from everyone needs to happen. It's so critical.
Lily, thank you very much for coming on and having a coffee with me on the show. Until next time, hopefully you'll be back again.
Bye-bye. Yeah, hopefully.
All right, until next time. As always, I loved my chat with Lulu and learnt a lot, and I hope you did too. Whether you're implementing a learning platform for the first time or simply looking for ways to drive more adoption and engagement to your existing learning platform, I hope that chat gave you some inspiration. You can find more details about myself and Lulu in the show notes, and also some of the references you'll find in the show notes. If you found this content useful, then please do like, subscribe, or share it with your colleagues and your friends. Until next time, have a good one.